Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian announced that the country will no longer target neighboring states unless attacks on Iran originate from their territory. Speaking on state television, he said that the decision had been approved by Iran's Interim Leadership Council, which has taken charge of national decision-making following the death of the Supreme Leader. According to Pezeshkian, the council concluded that expanding the conflict across the region would only deepen instability and create unnecessary enemies at a moment when Iran is already fighting a major war. The message was aimed particularly at Gulf countries, Iraq, and other states that host foreign military bases or operate in close security cooperation with the United States. Iranian leaders appear to be drawing a clear red line. If attacks are launched against Iran from any neighboring territory, those locations will become legitimate military targets. Otherwise, Iran says it will avoid widening the war by striking those countries directly. This announcement reflects a strategic calculation. While Iran is determined to continue its confrontation with Israel and resist American pressure, it also understands that opening multiple fronts across the Gulf or Iraq could lead to overwhelming military retaliation and potentially threaten the survival of the state itself. Iran has entered one of the most dangerous moments in its modern history as a rapidly escalating war with Israel and the United States enters its second week. Across Tehran and several other major cities, residents have been waking up to the sounds of massive explosions, missile interceptions, and air defense systems firing through the night sky. What began as a series of targeted strikes has now evolved into a broader military confrontation that is reshaping the strategic landscape of the Middle East. The conflict intensified after coordinated strikes by the United States, and Israel reportedly killed Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, triggering shockwaves throughout the Iranian political system. In the aftermath, the country moved quickly to establish an interim leadership structure to maintain control and coordinate the war effort. At the same time, Iranian forces have launched waves of drones and missiles toward Israeli targets while also striking strategic assets across the region. As the war expands, the fear among regional governments and global observers is that the conflict could spill beyond the immediate battlefield, dragging neighboring countries into a wider regional war. It is against this tense backdrop that Iran's new leadership has attempted to send a signal to surrounding states, announcing a major shift in its wartime targeting policy. The policy announcement comes amid increasingly aggressive rhetoric from Washington. US President Donald Trump has demanded what he calls Iran's unconditional surrender, warning that the United States will continue military operations until Tehran's leadership abandons its regional military capabilities and strategic programs. The demand echoes language historically associated with total war, signaling that Washington may be pursuing not just military pressure, but also a fundamental restructuring of Iran's political and security posture. Iranian officials have rejected these demands outright, arguing that surrender would amount to the collapse of national sovereignty. Instead, Tehran has framed the conflict as a struggle for survival against foreign aggression. Iranian missile and drone strikes against Israeli military and infrastructure targets have continued despite the heavy bombardment inside Iran. Reports indicate that some projectiles have also been directed toward military facilities and logistical hubs across the broader region, highlighting the interconnected nature of Middle Eastern security networks. For Iran's leadership, the challenge is to respond forcefully enough to demonstrate resilience while avoiding actions that could unify a larger coalition of regional states against it. The regional dimension of the war is particularly sensitive because many Middle Eastern countries host American military bases or logistical facilities. Nations such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Iraq are closely watching the situation, aware that any attack launched from their territory, whether intentional or accidental, could trigger Iranian retaliation under the new policy outlined by Pezeshkian. Iran has long accused the United States of using regional allies as staging grounds for operations against it, and previous conflicts have occasionally seen Iranian-backed groups target American installations in Iraq and Syria. However, the current war carries far greater stakes. By publicly declaring that it will refrain from attacking neighbors unless they are directly involved in launching strikes, Tehran is attempting to reassure regional governments while simultaneously placing pressure on them to remain neutral. The message is clear. If those countries allow their territory to be used for attacks against Iran, they risk becoming active participants in the war. This approach represents a blend of diplomacy and deterrence, seeking to prevent the formation of a broader anti-Iran coalition while still preserving Iran's right to retaliate if provoked. Inside Iran, the war has created an atmosphere of uncertainty mixed with defiance. Residents in Tehran and other cities have reported hearing repeated explosions as air defenses attempt to intercept incoming missiles and drones. Infrastructure damage, power disruptions, and emergency mobilization measures have become part of daily life. Yet the Iranian government has attempted to project an image of stability, emphasizing national unity and resilience in the face of external attacks. State media frequently highlights images of missile launches and military exercises, portraying them as evidence that the country retains its capacity to respond. At the same time, political leaders are trying to manage the internal consequences of losing the Supreme Leader, whose authority had long anchored Iran's political system. The Interim Leadership Council is meant to ensure continuity until a more permanent arrangement is established, but its effectiveness will depend on how well it balances competing factions within the Iranian establishment. Wartime conditions tend to consolidate power, but they also expose underlying tensions within political systems already under strain from economic sanctions and social pressures. As the conflict enters its second week, the risk of escalation remains extremely high. The war between Iran, Israel, and the United States has already reshaped regional calculations, forcing governments across the Middle East to reassess their security strategies. Iran's declaration that it will avoid attacking neighboring countries unless they directly participate in strikes may help limit the geographic spread of the conflict, but it does not guarantee stability. Miscalculations, intelligence errors, or proxy actions could easily ignite new fronts. Meanwhile, the rhetoric of unconditional surrender from Washington suggests that diplomatic off-ramps may be difficult to find in the short term. For the people of the region, the greatest fear is that what began as a series of strategic strikes could spiral into a prolonged war with devastating humanitarian and economic consequences. Whether the coming weeks bring further escalation or the first steps toward negotiation will depend on decisions made in Tehran, Washington, and Tel Aviv. For now, the explosions echoing across Iran's cities serve as a reminder that the Middle East has once again entered a period of profound and unpredictable conflict.